Hello and welcome to London Documented. Now in this episode we're going to be having a look at musical theatre and the impact it's had on the West End of London. Today I'm here in Trafalgar Square for West End Live. It's kind of like the theatre goers version of Glastonbury, showcasing some of the best musical theatre the West End has to offer. But West End Live isn't just about musical theatre, it's also celebrating the fantastic tourist attractions, retail experience and restaurants the West End has. Now earlier on today I met up with Councillor Robert Davis, who helped create West End Live.
We had previously done a big event in Leicester Square to celebrate 60 years since D-Day called West End at War, and that was so successful we decided to do another event the following year, and I thought of the need to promote the West End. The West End is in competition with all these out-of-town shopping centres, and I wanted to do something that really made people realise that the West End was unique. I remember the very first year when I went to some of my friends and begged them in the theatre world to contribute and to actually lend me some of their performers to perform on a square, in Leicester Square as it was then. And we had, I remember, Chicago. But even then when we had Chicago, they never gave us the first cast, they gave us the understudies. We started off in Leicester Square because that's where we did the first event, and we own it and can control it, and it was much easier for us to do it. It got to the stage when it was so crowded there were people queuing from 4 in the morning to get in, and often queuing 2 hours before they were allowed in because there was no space because of health and safety. And we were having to allow people to come out before we could admit people. We had to forcibly leave Leicester Square when the council were carrying out a major refurbishment of Leicester Square, which is now looking superb. So we had to, for 1 year, move out. We then decided where to go, and we looked at a number of other venues. Trafalgar Square was the obvious. We were very concerned and daunted by the fact it was massive. I was concerned about the noise of all the traffic, and we were amazed by the success of it. Not only you can't hear the traffic, you forget about the traffic, but we filled it. I thought it would be empty, and there we were. They were queuing just as much to get into Trafalgar Square. And in fact, at one stage last year, we had to stop the show for a few minutes because people couldn't get in, were standing in the street, in the road, and the traffic couldn't move. And the police asked us to calm things down, and we had to get people off the street. And that is the success of West End Live. But I think it's just right, and I think Trafalgar Square is just great. And the performers love it because they stand on the stage, not only do they see thousands of people before them, but they look up and they've got the wonderful National Gallery as a backdrop, and it's an amazing view. When we conceived the idea, I never expected it would get so big and so important. And it is now recognised in the industry. And in fact, even Broadway have been coming over to copy us, and they're looking at, they came over last year to see how it operated, because they've got ideas to do it on Broadway as well. So the fact that we're leading Broadway on something as exciting as this is something that really I'm very pleased with.
Now last year West End Live attracted over 500,000 people in the course of one weekend, and as you can see behind me already the crowds are swelling up. So we're going to go inside now and enjoy some shows. So obviously you were in Mamma Mia. It's a huge musical that's gone global around the world. How does it feel to be part of that kind of history of something so big?
It's fantastic.
It is amazing.
I've been in it for years, but not that many. Yeah, actually years. And I'm having a lovely time.
And we just joined and we're having a lovely time.
Time.
Super lovely.
Really brilliant.
It's pretty crazy actually. It can go really mad.
Yeah.
Last night was really crazy, wasn't it?
Yeah, brilliant.
I suppose when you obviously singing hit songs from ABBA, which is one of the biggest bands to ever go around, and obviously the songs are so well known. Do you get a lot of audience participation? Do they join in with the tunes?
Yeah, they own it. It's theirs. 4 levels of people shouting and dancing. It's brilliant.
And do you think when they made the film, did that have a huge impact on ticket sales and the popularity of the show?
Well, it's hard to say because it sells out all the time anyway, and so we're very lucky in that way. We don't sort of go out and think, oh, there's no one there. But there was a renewed interest in the movie. Well, after the movie came out, there was a renewed interest, and so they were able to extend the booking periods, I think.
Cool. And so you're going to be performing at West End Live today. So what do you think of West End Live? I mean, do you think it's a huge part that brings a lot of business and interest to the West End?
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I mean, it's just great for everyone to have a little taster. It's like a smorgasbord, isn't it?
Yeah. It's expensive to buy a ticket for a show, to commit to a show, so it's great for families to bring their kids. The kids kids really like it, they'll go, Mum, I want to see that.
There are a number of Joeys because the show does have a number of shows on around the world. So there's a company in South Africa called Handspring Puppet Company who made the show in conjunction with the National Theatre. They make all the horses there in Cape Town with local craftsmen. Everything is handmade on this horse. It takes about 3 or 4 months to make each one, and the detail's incredible. So there's not lots of these around. They're very special.
It's a beautiful, beautiful creature. And obviously the film War Horse was a huge success. Has that had much of an impact on sales and the popularity of War Horse in London?
I believe it has. I think it's opened up audiences to the stage show. They didn't realise it was there. The film was actually made after the stage production. Steven Spielberg came to see us in the show and then made the film afterwards. So we're quite pleased that it's that good that he wanted to tell this story to the big screen. The sales have been great. I actually haven't seen the film, but I'm a bit biased. I think the stage is much better.
Although London's West End is home to many theatres, it also has some of the country's best tourist attractions, such as the Science Museum and Ripley's Believe It or Not. And today I'm joined by Ali from Ripley's Believe It or Not. Hi Ali, how are you doing? You all right?
Very well, thank you.
Excellent, excellent. So can you tell us a little bit more about what you're doing here today?
Yes, absolutely. Well, Ripley's Believe It or Not have attended the event for the last couple of years, and it really is a fantastic show for showcasing all that the West End and in fact London has to offer visitors.
Cool, and how important is it for Ripley's to be involved in West End Live?
Very important. Well, as you may know, the West End community is very close-knit. We all work very closely together with a lot of the other businesses, and it's a really great way for us to show visitors, you know, that you, as a visitor, you can go to a West End show, an attraction, there's shopping, restaurants, bars. There really is a whole day out in the West End for everybody.
Excellent, and obviously being involved in West End Live for a few years, you kind of understand the feeling and vibe. Can you explain to people exactly what it feels like to be here?
It really is very unique. It's very vibrant, full of entertainment, full of fun for everybody visiting. You know, really something that we try and get across as Ripley's as well. We've got lots of workshops happening here today, really just trying to get the kids and everybody involved.
Today we're doing lots of activities inspired by the Banqueting House, which is the last surviving part of the Palace of Whitehall, which was the greatest palace in the whole of Europe. And in the 17th century they had the equivalent of West End musicals, which were masks, which were amazing theatrical performances with the most outlandish costumes, and they performed them all in this amazing space which was the Banqueting House. So we're doing activities inspired by that fantastic building and those great masks.
Sounds absolutely amazing. And how long have you been involved with West End Live?
Well, this is our 5th year, and it's been great because every year the event seems to have got bigger and bigger, and what's brilliant is just seeing so many different organisations involved in something that is free and fun and brings so many people together.
And how important is it to be involved in the West End community?
Well, I think what's really important is realising just the sheer diversity of all the different types of organisations, and so I think everyone realising that we all contribute in a different way. So you've got historic buildings, you've got amazing theatres, you've got amazing entertainment organisations, and then of course so many other types of places that it's a really great mixture in such a small area, actually, all doing so many different things, that by being a group of organisations together you can produce so much more.
In many ways, London is an ancient city, but the history of theatre in the West End only dates back to 1663. On the 7th of May 1663, London's first theatre opened and was simply known as the Theatre on Bridges Street. But this theatre was destroyed 9 years later by fire and was rebuilt and redesigned by Sir Christopher Wren, and is there today and known as Theatre Royal, Drury Lane. Then in December 1720 the Haymarket Theatre opened, and this was shortly followed by the Theatre Royal Covent Garden in 1732, or better known today as the Royal Opera House. But it wasn't until 1806 that the West End Theatre District started to become established, with the opening of many small theatres and music halls, including the Adelphi on the Strand in November of 1806. The expansion of the West End Theatre District gained pace with the Theatres Act of 1843, which relaxed the conditions for performances of plays, and the Strand gained another venue when the Vaudeville opened on the 16th of April of 1870. The next few decades saw the opening of many new theatres in the West End. The Criterion Theatre opened in Piccadilly Circus on the 21st of March 1874, and in 1881 2 more houses appeared. The Savoy Theatre in the Strand, built by Richard Doyle Carter, specifically to showcase the comic operas of Gilbert and Sullivan, and that opened on the 10th of October. And 5 days later the Comedy Theatre opened as the Royal Comedy Theatre on Pounton Street in Leicester Square. The theatre building boom continued until about World War I. But one of the most recent additions to the history of theatre is the Royal National Theatre. Now, the National Theatre is one of only 2 UK publicly funded theatres, the other being the Royal Shakespeare Company. Now, before moving here to the South Bank of London, the National Theatre Company was based at the Old Vic in Waterloo, under the artistic direction of a very famous actor called Sir Laurence Olivier. The National Theatre opened its doors to the public in 1976, so it's one of London's newest theatres, and it's staged some of the best plays that have ever been written, including Warhorse, One Man, Two Governors, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, and much, much more. The building itself houses 3 theatres, the Olivia, Littleton and Cottelsloe. Now this makes it possible to show multiple shows throughout the season. The National Theatre has always been a forward-thinking theatre, and in 2009 the theatre began NT Live, a series of live productions broadcasted to cinemas. The programme began with the production of Fedre starring Helen Mirren. Now this was screened live to 70 cinemas across the UK, and since then NT Live has broadcast to over 700 venues in 22 countries. But when the venue first opened, it wasn't the most popular of buildings, with a certain Prince of Wales saying it's a very clever way of hiding a nuclear power station in the centre of London. Now, walking around the West End of London, it's pretty easy to find things to do and to be entertained, but this wasn't always the case. This part of London used to be reserved for people of great importance and the super wealthy. If you wanted to go and get entertainment, the place you would look would be Southwark and the south banks of the river. But the kind of entertainment you got back then isn't exactly the same kind of entertainment you'll get nowadays. Back then you'd be treated to things like bear baiting and cockfighting, 2 very gruesome sports which would pit animals against each other, and you'll place a bet to see which one would survive. That said, that's not to say that there weren't theatres in London. In Southwark there were 3 playhouses. The first one to open was the Rose Theatre, which was a huge success, and that was shortly followed by the Swan, which capitalised on the success of the Rose. And then the third theatre, and quite possibly the most famous theatre in the world, opened its doors, the Globe. Now this is one of the most beautiful theatres and pieces of architecture in London, Shakespeare's Globe Theatre. Now this is not the original theatre, but a replica that was built in 1997, a project that was started up by Sam Wanamaker. Now sadly Sam Wanamaker passed away a year before the completion of the theatre and never saw the finished project. The original Globe Theatre was built in 1599 and was owned by 6 actors from the Lord Chamberlain's men, one of which was William Shakespeare, arguably the greatest playwright ever. His plays were diverse and in some cases quite political and always entertaining. Even today his plays are being performed across the world and modernised to appeal to a generation. On 29th of June 1613, the Globe Theatre went up in flames during the performance of Henry VIII. A theatrical cannon misfired and ignited the wooden beams and thatching overhead. Amazingly, no one was hurt apart from one man whose breeches caught on fire. But this was put out with a pint of ale, a very British thing to do. A year later the Globe was rebuilt, but this was also short-lived. Like all theatres in London, the Globe was closed by the Puritans in 1642, and in 1644 the theatre was pulled down and to be never seen again, until this replica was built. Now this theatre can hold 1,500 people standing and seated. Now this theatre also has a vast open roof, so if it rains, just like in Shakespeare's day, you do get wet. But this isn't the original site of Shakespeare's Globe Theatre. The original site is in the car park down by the Financial Times building. And here it is, the original Globe Theatre site. You can actually make out the foundations by the bricks that are laid down in the car park over there. Whereas the current Globe can fit 1,500 people in it, the original could hold 3,000 people. This was a huge theatre and a very popular one. It's hard to imagine what the atmosphere would have been like when seeing a play here. Theatre was very different then from what it is now. If your audience didn't approve, instead of people tweeting about it and updating their Facebook pages, you had rotten food thrown at you, and you were heckled to the brink where actors could no longer perform. And not only that, you also had to deal with the smells. Hygiene wasn't the Elizabethan strong point, and in the summer, having 3,000 people in a confined space wasn't the most pleasant of experiences. But putting all that aside, seeing a performance here would have been just outstanding. Can you imagine the audience's thrill at seeing something like Macbeth, the pure shock and horror of something that gruesome? And then also the love affair of Romeo and Juliet for the first time. It would have been just incredible to see. Now, just like Shakespeare and any great playwright, you have to be a brilliant wordsmith. The power of words is something amazing. They can have the power to make you happy, make you sad, make you cry, and even change people's opinions. Now, one of the best lyricists in the world is Sir Tim Rice, and earlier on I was fortunate enough to meet up with him and Julian Bird, the CEO of Society of London's Theatres. I think it's the first time that we're going to get a sneak preview of a certain Sir Tim Rice's show.
Indeed. One of the exciting things about West End Live is that we can show all the long runners that everybody knows and loves, the Les Mis and the Phantom, and also give some exclusive previews of things to come. And we're delighted. This literally, I think, is the world premiere today of Tim's latest show.
So no pressure there for yourself.
None at all. I'm not performing.
True. So Tim, From Here to Eternity, your new show that's opening up. I have to ask, I've seen the people working on the production, and you have got some amazing people working on the production side of the show.
Well, yes, I believe that to be true. I've been so long out of musicals, about 10 years, that it's a completely new world when I came back to it. And I was delighted and amazed by the people that have moved into the pole positions. And Sutra Gilmore doing the set, and Javier, who's doing our choreography, are just fantastic. So I hope we can match that with our songs and story, but I think we can.
And can you tell us a bit more about From Here to Eternity? Can you tell us a bit more about the story?
Well, it's a story set in Hawaii, in Honolulu in Hawaii, in the war, Second World War, and it's based in a GI camp, or a GIHQ, just before Pearl Harbor. So it's just before America came into the war. But really, it's a love story. It's two love stories between soldiers and women who are also on the island, one of whom is the commander's wife. So it's a very strange and tortured relationship. And really, it's the passionate love stories to the background of impending war. And many people might have seen the film from way back with Burt Lancaster and Deborah Carr, but we're actually based on the book. We have the rights to James Jones's great novel, but obviously the story is the story more or less as was in the film. But our version's gone right back to the book, so we're able to deal with aspects of the story that weren't in the 1953 movie.
So going back to West End Live, how important do you think it is to have an event like this?
Well, I think the event, beyond any doubt, is incredibly important. It's a wonderful showcase for what's on in the West End, which is extraordinary. I mean, there's so much stuff and it's so different, so varied.
Yeah.
So I hope we'll make a small contribution to that.
Fantastic. And Julian, I'm not sure I'm allowed to ask you this, but do you have a particular favourite show?
No, of course I can't really have a favourite. I also get the great privilege to produce the Olivier Awards as well, and Tim kindly accepted the honour of the special award just 2 years ago, and so I get a chance to work with all the shows on an ongoing basis. And as Tim just said, the great thing about the West End is the variety of shows that we have on, and if nothing else, this weekend shows that great variety.
Last year, ticket sales for West End shows were at £500 million. Now, this is just the theatre. When you take consideration restaurants and retails, it's estimated that the last Christmas weekend, people would spend £1.5 million every minute. But in a world that's changing and technology is evolving every day, is that it for the West End? After 2 centuries of being the central hub of London, is the West End about to take its final bow?